All right, good morning. I just want to take y'all to take a second just to think about your favorite snack that you might eat. And then imagine yourself at your favorite sporting event. Now, take yourself out of that sporting event that you're in and put yourself at a Rice athletic event. Now, after you finish eating that snack, what do? You take that article, whatever the container or item that it came in, and put it in the trash can. Well, at a Rice sporting athletic event, that item that's in that trash can will simply just stay in the trash can, and then when that trash day comes, goes to a landfill. Well, our team and this business plan which we have made seeks to change that. We don't want it to just go sit in a landfill. We would like to take that and send it to a recycling center where that trash item could be repurposed and reused for future generations. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself as Emmanuel Ellerbee.
I'm Ansley Jones.
I'm Saathoff.
I'm Sophia, Erhard.
And the proposed business plan of Recycle Rice, increasing recycling within Rice Athletics. So first, why are we even considering, to recycle? Why are we trying to do what we're trying to do? So the importance of sustainability. There are three main pillars of sustainability. First is economic development, which states that if we do go green, how will that affect jobs and how, therefore, will that affect employment and businesses around? The second pillar is social development, making sure that if any legislation does come that we pass for sustainability, that the quality of life for everybody is equal across the boards, where nobody is being introduced to pollution that can affect their health. The second thing, and the one that I think is the most important, is obviously environmental protection, which states that for future generations, how are we doing to keep the earth in tip-top shape so that they can be able to enjoy some of the basic things that we enjoy today. So this picture right here is a picture of a normal trash can within the Rice's football locker room. As you can see, there are protein shake bottles that are plastic bottles, snacks, paper plates, and of course athletic tape that will be used on a day basis. And this is normally what a trash can within Rice Athletics looks like. And all of these things that are pictured to my right are all things that can be recycled. So what are our objectives and what are we trying to do to make this business plan happen? First thing that we had to do was conduct a waste audit and look at the infrastructure of recycling within Rice Athletics. The second thing is to increase the amount of recycled material within Rice Athletics. And the last thing, which we are here today to do, is present findings of our waste audits to get potential sponsors so that we can expand recycling within Rice Athletics. So now I'll pass it to Ansley, who will talk about our future action plans.
The first step in our action plan included meeting with Richard Johnson, the Director of Sustainability here at Rice, and he told us all about a project that took place in the last school year, also led by a civil engineering student, where she looked at the academic and residential buildings of Rice, and she conducted these waste audits to figure out where there was inadequate recycling. And in doing so, she was able to secure funding from various sources around campus and obtain 367 new bins to be distributed across campus. While her project was great, it did overlook some buildings, the athletic facilities, so we are carrying out phase 2 of her project. So as Richard suggested, we were going to employ the same methods that Emmy, the student who conducted the last project, did in the last school year. Then her first step was conducting waste audits. So we met with the facility managers from Tudor Fieldhouse, Reckling Park, and the Rice Stadium, and they gave us tours around these facilities, and we carried around floor plans for the facilities so that we could mark up where there was inadequate recycling and come up with a proposal for the number of bins that would be needed in each facility. Then we filled out an application to the Rice Environmental Society with the proposed number of bins, and they approved our application, so we received all of the funding we needed for our project. And then we asked the Director of Custodial Grounds from Facilities Engineering and Planning, Eusebio Franco, to go ahead and order the bins. And now that the bins have arrived, we are now in the implementation phase. We are installing bins across the athletic facilities. So as I said, we conducted these waste audits to see where there was inadequate recycling. And what we found was that Rice Stadium has no existing indoor recycling, whereas Reckling Park and Tudor Fieldhouse have some, but inadequate levels. So of course, Rice Stadium will see the biggest increase in the amount of recycling. Now, these numbers here are simply projections based on a lot of assumptions. We looked at the number of users for these facilities, as well as the average number of days of operability of each facility per year. And then we used an average recycling rate per capita as determined by the Game Day Challenge, which is a national competition between universities and their athletic departments to increase their recycling. So we multiplied that rate by our number of users and our annual days of operability to come up with these projections. And as you can see, we're looking at an annual increase of recycling by about 13,750 pounds per year. Now, breaking this down financially, we looked at two different types of models, the smaller bin on the top and the larger bin on the bottom. And for each facility and the numbers that we were requesting, the total cost of our project came out to $1,010. So now to calculate the financial payback, we had to look at how much waste management charges Rice to haul away disposables, and that has on average been about 2 cents per pound. However, recycling is generally revenue neutral, so we assumed a cost of 0 to haul away recyclables. Therefore, it makes financial sense to divert as much as possible to the recycling stream. So with our projection of 13,750 pounds per year, we're looking at an annual savings of $275 per year, which would mean an annual, a payback period of 3.67 years. And this falls within a 5-year cutoff that Rice typically employs for capital budgeting. Therefore, our project is worthwhile. Now, Ryan will discuss our environmental payback.
Hi everyone. In order to gauge the impacts of our project, we had to actually break it down by each material, because each material has different inputs, different energy metrics, and so what you see here is that about 50% of what we expect in our waste reduction to be paper, about a quarter bit will be plastic, about 20% you're looking at to be aluminum, and about a little under 10% to be glass. We looked at both natural resources used, such as inputs for paper as trees. For plastic, you're looking at different oil products. For aluminum, you're looking at bauxite. And then energy reductions associated with it, specifically kilowatt hour usage. And then finally, the GHG emissions that are associated with the fossil fuel burnings to do these processes. For this, we utilized two different peer universities. First was the University of Southern Indiana. The reason we chose them was because they had actually pretty in-depth analysis of savings for paper specifically. But then in the other three categories, we used Stanford, who had very detailed, from the Stanford Recycling Center had very detailed results for looking at perhaps barrels of fuel that is used for each one, kilowatt hours that are used, and landfill diversion specifically. And so kind of giving a breakdown of the different comparison to diversion. As you can see here, we're looking at some pretty significant savings, especially when you're looking at paper, plastic, and aluminum. But I'm going to actually, for the sake of time, focus today on just aluminum and glass because they are pretty stark differences. In fact, aluminum is where we're going to find the most savings. What Stanford found is that 95% of energy can be saved in recycling. That's because aluminum is a very energy-intensive process, but once it's created, it's highly recyclable. 100% of the can is recycled. And in fact, it only takes 60 days for it to be recycled to go back out. And so you can see one aluminum can re-enter society 6 times through 1 calendar year, which is pretty impressive. Inversely, glass, actually there's almost no savings compared to virgin inputs. As you see here, we're only looking at actually half a ton annually being saved with our project. But even still, it's only 1 cubic yard. You're looking at 23 kilowatt hours and only 62 pounds of CO2 being not emitted. And if you look at actually paper, that when I say consumes 865, what I'm talking about is the trees that are saved via our project will consume CO2 as they when they're still around. And so actually the trees saved in our project will actually consume more CO2 than will be saved via our glass. This will be pretty important in what Sophia is going to talk about next. We're not going to pass over, so you can talk about obstacles and future implementation.
Although we have a small initial payback period of 3.67 years, there are some obstacles that we may face in the implementation of our plan. So the first being that Houston has just recently passed a piece of legislation that actually bans curbside pickup of glass. And although Rice is not on the contract that the city is on. If this were to expand into rice and also into other materials such as paper or plastic, it could severely impact the feasibility of this project and just how applicable recycling is. And as Ryan mentioned, that glass already doesn't really have a very high environmental impact or payback. The other materials, if those were not recycled anymore, that would result in even less environmental paybacks. The second obstacle would be to have consistent participation and promotion of the recycling bins in the athletic centers. Our project didn't focus on any real promotion, and we see that a future implementation of to overcome this obstacle would be to have a campaign maybe titled Recycle Rice, and distribute flyers, posters, and maybe even have a competition between the athletic centers of who can recycle the most to promote this awareness and to get people to increase their recycling in the athletic centers. And actually, one of the advertisements that we have on all of the bins has a sticker that says what people can recycle, what can be recycled elsewhere, and what you cannot recycle. So that's one way that we kind of tried to overcome this. The third obstacle that we may face is the overall sustainability of recycling. So it is known really everywhere right now that cradle-to-cradle products that are non-disposable and also reusable have really benefit the environment more than reusable products than recyclable products. Recyclable products are very energy intensive, so switching to a cradle-to-cradle system where the life cycle is complete and there's no waste disposal allows for higher environmental impacts. And one way to also do this is to create a 100% paperless system within the athletic centers. As far as our future plans, we focused on the indoor spaces of the athletic centers, and we really didn't look into the outdoor areas in Reckling Park or Rice Stadium. So this is where the athletes practice and the coaches are, and there are bottles being thrown out there every day. So we would like to look into increasing the amount of outdoor large recycling bins. We also didn't look into the fans and the tailgaters areas within these athletic centers, and the University of Missouri actually has created a kind of recycling culture amongst the tailgaters where they give out bags to the tailgaters before the game, and they actually have collected more than like 19 tons of 19 tons of recyclables during one game, just since their community is so large. Thirdly, we are competing in the College Sports Sustainability Makeover Contest, and this contest is a national competition that has over $50,000 worth of prizes associated with it, and one being 10 large recycling bins, so that could really help us meet the goal of putting large outdoor recycling bins in the places where athletes practice. And finally, we would like for future teams to look into more cradle-to-cradle options instead of focusing more on recycling. We see that recycling is kind of a temporary solution to really all waste right now, and so we would like to see more cradle-to-cradle products being implemented, and this could also increase awareness around campus for these products. So now we would like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
So, can I jump in? Sorry, I don't want to monopolize. First, a compliment in terms of process. I think one thing that you all learned from, this experience last year was the importance of actually talking to the facility managers, because there were some instances last year where they showed up with bins and the facilities managers were like, what's going on? And some of them were really supportive, and a few had some issues that they needed to be kind of ironed out. But one of the questions I have is actually on your last slide, So did you say that you had submitted something for the sustainability makeover contest, or that you're recommending that we do, or?
Well, it's actually, yes, we're like in the process of submitting it.
Okay.
Let's do tomorrow.
Yeah.
I hope you're almost done with your submittal then.
Yes.
We're on track.
Well, and the other thing that I was going to ask you is, what are your future plans? You've outlined that nicely. So other questions, people?
Could anything be done to reduce waste, as recycling is not returning the amounts on the commodities as it was before, and the assumption of zero, that you break even on the commodities may or may not hold.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what we were touching on with like the whole like paperless idea. I think that paper's probably the biggest opportunity area for athletics. Because in this instance, we're really focusing on like the office spaces in Reckling, the office spaces in Tudor, and the office spaces like in the right stadium. And so this is often like computer work. It is like a person's office that this bin is going into. However, there's not been many opportunity areas, I feel like, in the other free substances. One thing I would encourage, though, is because like the environmental savings of aluminum are so high, I think I would try to encourage Athletics to start phasing from like plastic heavy to being more aluminum heavy, because plastic is still a very energy intensive process, recycling or not. Whereas when you recycle aluminum, you like actually have huge environmental savings comparatively.
So, in your research, did you see any best case examples from athletics at other universities, or things that we should aspire to?
Yeah, so when I was coming up with the projections for the amount of recycling we were going to see, I basically used an average from all of the game day recycling rates. But that's a competition that goes on every year, and Harvard won last year. They had like a 65% recycling rate or something like that.
So walk me through how you did those projections, because you had them to the thousandth of a pound, which is, I think more precise than you had intended. But
so I looked at all of these schools that were in that competition, and it gave the recycling rate per capita for each school.
Okay, so per capita or per attendee to the event, or?
It was per attendee.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I just used an average of all those numbers, and then I came up with however many users we have at each of our facilities, and multiplied by that, and multiplied it by the number of days that our athletic facilities operate, which is also an assumption. But I think I kind of actually did this another way also, where I looked at Emmy's initial audits from the last study, and she found that like before installing new bins, it was like about a 32% recycling rate. So I applied that to Tudor and Reckling, and then Rice Stadium had 0, and then like assumed after installing all of them will get up to around 50%. And with that projection, it was about the same number actually.
Okay, so that's good. You tried it a couple different ways.
Yeah.
Just sort of a note for the future is you can sort of turn these into some nice round numbers without all the decimals.
Yeah.
So that it looks more like an estimate rather than a precise measurement.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that you tested 2 different methods and you came up with pretty similar results. That's a good thing.
Thank you.